The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, Regional Media, Coastal Broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live here on 98.7 The Coast from beautiful Wildwood, New Jersey. It is just so gorgeous. It's cold. I know I said that last week, and it's getting colder, and I get it, it's fall, but I hate it. I just want to hibernate and do my show from my basement, but Mark won't come over my house, so he runs the board, so I guess that's not, no, I'm just kidding. That's not going to be a thing. But we have two fabulous, powerful women on the show tonight. I'm really excited to have both of these women on. The first hour is Regina Egea. She is the president of Garden State Initiative, and she's going to tell us why it's time to bury the death tax. There are still several states that have a death tax, including the wonderful state of New Jersey, where I reside and where Money Talk with Melanie is being broadcast from. So we're going to talk about why it's time to bury it, what the benefits are, etc. Besides the money, there's economic and other reasons why that tax needs to go away. And then in the 8 p.m. hour, we have the wonderful one and only returning guest, Eva Rosenberg, and she is also known as the Internet's TaxMama. We're going to discuss theft, casualty, and romance scams, which are deductible. A very interesting topic that she and I have been talking about for the last couple of weeks, but I'm going to let her elaborate and expound on those things. I didn't even know that those kinds of things were deductibles. Some are, some aren't. And again, I know you hear me say it over and over and over again. This is why voting is important. This is why paying attention to laws are important. These are the people who make the rules that run your life. Just saying. So, before we get to our first hour guest, a little bit of news. You heard ABC News report that the Biden administration announced that they're going to release more oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, what is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? That's what the news doesn't do. That's what Money Talk with Melanie is here for, to tell you things like that. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is supposed to be reserved. This is an oil reserve that's reserved for tragedies and things that happen that are emergencies. It's supposed to be only use, break glass in case of emergency. Then we tap into these reserves. A hurricane, something like that, some kind of natural disaster. Only Biden's been tapping into it because the price of oil has been high, thus the price of gas has been high, thus driving inflation. You know what they say rolls downhill. And that is not a reason to tap into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And unless you're completely naive and haven't noticed that there's a major midterm election coming up in 3 weeks, okay, that is another reason. This is a political move, and I don't care what anybody says. Like I said, you're naive to believe it is not a political move. Now, what they have said is that they're going to refill the reserve when prices dip to $67 to $72 a barrel of oil. I'll believe it when I see it. But right now, the oil reserves are at a serious low. And that's concerning because if we do have some type of natural disaster where the refinery shut down or, God forbid, or destroyed, then that's going to be a problem for us. Not only, it won't be a matter of, oh, wow, gas is sky high. It'll be a matter of, oh, wow, there's no gas to be had. And that's a problem because if there's no gas to be had, it's not just your cars. This is what you have to remember. The items that we buy from your Walmarts, your supermarkets, all of these places are transported many times by truck, by air. What are they fueled on? They are fueled on gas and oil. So that's why these things are very important. Also, did you know that plastics are made from oil? Fun fact. A lot of people don't realize that. So whenever there's a low quantity of oil, that raises the price, and it raises the price of everything that I just talked about. So that's why this is really, really concerning. Now, on a lighter note, Netflix, I've just found this very funny. Netflix is going to charge you fees for password sharing starting early next year. Now, I in my former life was a teacher who taught economics and financial literacy, and I used to teach my students that sharing passwords was stealing, because it is. You're supposed to pay for an account. That is how that works. And my students would try to convince me that it was okay because they have plenty of money. And I would be like, well, where do you think that their plenty of money comes from? It comes from selling their services. And each person is supposed to have their own account. So Netflix is finally starting to crack down and get wise to this, which is a good idea. It's a good idea for their business model. And stop stealing people. Stop being cheap. How much is a Netflix account? It's not even that expensive. Come on. I'm just saying. So, but what they're going to do, they're cracking down, but they're also kind of complying. So what they're doing is they're making it so that you can have sub accounts. But I still believe that you're probably going to have to live in the same house or something like that. So I thought that was an interesting story, and people would find that pretty amusing. I did anyway. Now, get this. Last week I told you that Social Security members, people on fixed income mostly, who are on Social Security are getting a huge cost of living raise, 8%. And I was talking to someone about this when I reported this last week, and I said to them, well, I would imagine that they would move the threshold of how much money you could make, and that they would make adjustments based on the fact that they're giving you a raise. Well, that apparently, I don't know why I thought that the government would use common sense. Yeah, shame on me. I should know better. I have enough experience to know that it's probably not going to happen. So I ran across an article on Fox News that said record high Social Security increase could mean steeper taxes for some retirees, and that inflation could push Social Security recipients into a higher tax bracket. Well, that's just great. And it happens all the time. You're thinking it's wonderful that you got this raise until tax time comes around. And guess what? You're in a whole new tax bracket. You think it's great to get a second job and get a hustle. That's fantastic, unless it pushes you into a new tax bracket. I've had that happen to me as a teacher. And for a couple summers, I just didn't work. It wasn't worth it because I was getting killed. That second job was kicking my behind in taxes. And it looks like, unless there's some legislative fix, that is what's going to happen to Social Security recipients, especially if you are on the edge as far as your tax bracket is concerned. It's kind of a shame. I hope there's going to be a legislative fix for that, because many people who are on Social Security, you have a fixed income. Last item, a little on the fun side, but not so much fun for your pockets. Not surprisingly, Halloween candy is super high. The prices are skyrocketing. Here's an example of how much they cost this year. Apparently, the price increase is around 13% when you compare the prices of bulk Halloween candy from last year, 2021. For example, Walmart is selling a 160-piece fun-sized variety pack of M&M's, Snickers, Twix, Skittles, and Starburst for $16.98. My goodness, that's $2.24 more than it was last year. Amazon is selling a 120-piece variety pack of Hershey's candy bars for $10.99. That's $2.01 than it was last year. And in Sam's Club, that's where you're supposed to get like the best prices wholesale, right? They're selling a 450-piece variety pack of Mars. Anyway, a 400-piece variety pack of Mars candy for $26.98, and that's $2.50 more than this time last year. So, give out fruit. The kids love that. Raisins, I think you should definitely do that. Dried cherries, that's probably a good idea. I'm completely kidding. If you're riding with your kids, they're like, please, no, don't do that. Yeah, but you're going to have to be a little bit judicious and maybe cut Halloween a little short. I don't know, because the prices of that good candy, that good stuff, are sky high. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. When we come back on the other side of the break, we will be talking to Regina Egea from the Garden State Initiative.
Brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest the first hour is Regina Egea. She's the president of Garden State Initiative, and she's going to tell us why it's time to bury the death tax. Regina Egea is president of the Garden State Initiative, an independent and educational organization dedicated to promoting new investment, innovation, and economic growth in New Jersey. She brings diverse private and public sector leadership experience to the organization's mission, and among many honors, has been recognized as one of MrCreditRepair.biz magazine's top 50 women in business in 2019. ROI NJ's Power List 2019, 2020, and 2021, and Insider New Jersey's Top 100 Policymakers in 2021. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Regina Egea to the show.
Great to be with you, Melanie.
It's great to be with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And tell everybody Garden State Initiative's website, because they really do. Everything that was in that bio is absolutely true about the Garden State Initiative. And even if you don't live in New Jersey, you would do well to check it out just from a policy standpoint and research standpoint, because in my opinion, it's just so informative.
Oh, well, thanks, Melanie. Yeah, it's all one word, gardenstateinitiative.org is our website. And on there, you can find, as you said, all of our work. And we really pride ourselves, frankly, in the quality of the research we produce. We use third parties that have, great credibility in the fields in which we are exploring, and we'll talk a little bit about one of those areas tonight, as well as we convene forums and virtual forums to help broaden the education aspect of our mission. We've only been around 5 years, but we've really built a good following and a strong brand. We've been very, focused on delivering economic and fiscal policy messages that people really resonated with.
Indeed. And, one of the things that I like about the Garden State Initiative is that when they say it's independent research and educational organization, it truly is. As somebody who is a bit of an academic and a nerd who actually likes to read studies, it truly is, not partisan at all, and is very independent. And I like the level of objectivity and just the sound foundational things that they do, and the foundational perspective. It's just based on pure economic principles, no partisan BS, and I love that.
Well, as you're pointing out, we try to deliver kind of a common language explanation of a lot of economic data. Every month, right, we give a really explanation on the labor and jobs report in our state and the quarterly GDP, or gross domestic product. And while we pride ourselves, as you say, on independence, we also try to make it very approachable for people. So I really do hope people will visit the website, and you can look for short reports, long reports, and regular just analysis of economic data.
For sure, and that is very true. It's extremely easy to read. Sometimes if you go to Google Scholar, and if you say, what is Google Scholar? Then you're not a nerd. But if you go to Google, just like there's an area of the website called Google Scholar, there is, for nerds. But, those studies tend to, many of them, speak over your head. But to your point, Garden State Initiative really speaks it in pretty plain language and explains economics and economic policies very plainly, and it's easy to understand.
That's our goal. So, and we're also trying new formats. I think you and I, when we spoke previously, we talked about, we have research for people like you who love to read reports, and I wish, a lot of people would be in that category, but we're also delivering a podcast now on a monthly basis, which really tries to summarize with some of the authors of our reports. We're doing some short videos. We're doing all sorts of different formats now to try to really meet, individuals like you do, where they're at and deliver how they want to receive the information.
Yes, just really an excellent resource, and I'm certainly glad we found each other. So let's talk a little bit about this death tax. First of all, what is it? When I say death tax is kind of a nickname, but what is it actually called?
The New Jersey inheritance tax.
Right. And other states have it besides New Jersey, and there's some on the federal level as well. And what does that tax do?
So this inheritance tax, some people confuse estate tax with inheritance tax. So this is the remaining, and there's only 6 states, and actually one of the 6 have already eliminated it. They're phasing it out. But it is a tax when an individual is deceased, when they want to pass assets to anyone who's not in a direct bloodline, a child, grandchild, that the estate, the recipient of the either asset or money, gets charged a tax to be the recipient. So if you, or as an individual, either don't have children or you want to bequeath either property or money to like a niece or a nephew or someone who's not in the direct bloodline, that individual will be taxed before they can receive that asset. Which
is amazing when you think about how often our money is taxed to begin with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's ridiculous. First you get income tax when you make your money. Then there's sales tax, right, when you buy something. Then there's state tax. And then depending on what municipality you live in, there could be a local tax. When I lived in Philly, the local tax was 4.76%. That's almost 5% just for the privilege of living or working in Philly. And that was years ago. God only knows what it is now.
Well, and now it's just for the privilege of dying in our state, right?
Right.
You get taxed as well. Yeah, it's really quite unusual in that the state would determine really who you can give your money to and distinguish that you tax in one case and not tax in another. It's very discriminatory, actually. And frankly, it passes moral judgment on who is important in your life. And that's one of the, just reasons why we feel really strongly about this. Number one, it's uncompetitive, as we talked about at the beginning. Only a couple of states have it. But who is the state to decide who you can give your money to after they've taxed you, as you just said, multiple times already?
Right, exactly. I thought, when I heard of the death tax years ago, I thought the nerve, the audacity, like, what are we doing? You already taxed us. And here you're being taxed on the same money. I mean, this is money that someone has invested, that someone's put away, and now they've passed on, and they're trying to pass that on to someone else, and that person gets taxed again.
Yeah, and it's a very regressive tax too. One of the misnomers is that this is felt to be a rich person's tax, but it really is not. Because it's generally an individual who doesn't have a tax advisor, and this is really only comes to light when the person passes and this individual is the recipient of the money or the asset, and they find out about it. So, number one, generally people without, really a lot of tax advice fall victim to this. But interestingly enough, Melanie, Iowa did a study before they repealed theirs just in the last year or so. I did a study that 95% of this tax that is paid are paid by individuals earning less than $80,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, so that tells you, right, this is not about large estates. This is about small, individuals who either have a home, maybe a car, as you said, maybe some savings, farms, that don't have direct children to pass it to. And these are the individuals who are really being burdened, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars the state collects every year.
For sure. And, the other thing is, when people who have more money are going to make financial moves, are usually more financially astute, right? Yep. So they're going to make financial moves in order to avoid this tax burden on people that they're going to bequeath their inheritance to. They might sell their businesses. They might, decrease getting new businesses or making new investments as they move closer to meeting the Lord, as I would put it. So, that creates an inefficiency of the policy in general.
Absolutely. It encourages, as you say, either early sale or, a sale at a price that you wouldn't have normally, had to bear because you're trying to avoid the tax. it's an incredible burden, not just to the individual, but to the whole economy.
For sure. And, one of the articles that the Garden State Initiative has on their website talks about the unintended consequences. Another one that they talk about, and this was big during COVID for other reasons, but the migration of retirees to other states that don't have that same tax penalty.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gets cited every time. Both the CPAs to all the tax, organizations just talk about that. And, you can see it. I mean, there are people, since we did this report, it was back in the spring, we actually initially, issued this report. I've had people contact us, saying that, they're really disappointed because now they have to move. They feel like they have to move because they want to give assets or whatever to nieces or caretakers, frankly, that aren't always their family members. And they don't want to lose, I've, built this asset and now I'm going to have to give some of it away when I really want to give it to this person who's important to me. No. They're saying, I'm going to leave the state.
And the people that you have to give it to is the state of all, of all places that you have to give your money to. It's not even like they require you to give it to a charity or something.
No. It goes to state, and then who knows where it ends up? As you know better than me. It's very unclear where all this money ends up once it gets in the state's hands.
Oh, their accounting is very fuzzy. I've talked about it before on this show. I've talked about how when I got my business degree, you do a different kind of budgeting than when I did my master's, which is in public administration. So my regular business degree dealt with private entities, right? Private entities, personal finances, that kind of thing. But public administration deals with public financing and public budgeting. And I was explaining, it might have even been on last week's show, that public budgeting is done with a deficit. They literally budget with imaginary money.
Well, sure, it's anticipated. Right. Well, the other thing that, because, you and many of your listeners have been on the business side, one of the most disorienting things for anybody who's been in business is that there's no balance sheet in government. I mean, literally, government lives hand to mouth. They, imagine money that's going to come in, they spend it, and then they just start the process all over again the next year.
Indeed. And here's the killer. The real killer to me is when they say they're going to cut this budget, they're going to cut that from the budget, but people don't understand that when the government says they're going to cut, what they mean is they're not going to increase that money. It's not really a cut. Like when I say I'm going to cut my grocery budget, that means literally next month I'm going to spend less.
That's right, Melanie. People ought to say, if you're cutting the budget, that means my taxes are going down, right?
Yeah, no.
That never happens.
That is not the way it works at all. That means we just decided we weren't going to raise your taxes. Maybe.
Right,
not
as much as I would have otherwise.
Exactly. That's exactly what that means. And I don't think enough people explain that.
Oh, I know. I think the public really needs to press public officials locally, town council members, as well as Assembly and Senate candidates, when are you going to lower my taxes? Because, it is just not a livable environment in New Jersey. And people around us, states around us, other work we do, they're all, not all, but many are lowering their actual taxes, both personal, sales tax, business taxes, and we're just completely leaving ourselves as a sitting duck for other states to just draw people and jobs.
And something similar is happening in California. They're dealing with a mass migration. New York, same thing, because people can't live there anymore. It's not livable.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, look at Tesla, right? They moved a whole operation out of California into Texas, and Boeing has moved. I mean, companies are not concerned anymore, and they're feeling very mobile. They can take their workforce. People are willing to move with them, or they know they can go to a place where they can build up a workforce. And it is not the inhibitor that people think that it used to be, where you have bricks and mortar headquarters.
Not to mention the progress of virtual work now since the pandemic. Some people can just stay where they are, and their company can move, and it's fine.
Exactly. No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think, the naivete that, you can keep escalating the cost to live in New Jersey at a time when, everybody's looking around and thinking, where do I, what's about my quality of life? Where do I want to be? What am I willing to trade off? I don't think that we can count on that the wonderful assets that we do have, like the shore, like the mountains, like the beautiful fall we're all experiencing, is just not going to outweigh the incredible burden.
Indeed, that is for sure. Now, what do you say to people or people in the state and the government who believe that you just need to have more and more taxes and it would create a huge hole in the budget? Like, what about that if they didn't have this inheritance tax?
Well, that's always the common refrain, right? I mean, the hard work, as you know, and anybody who has run a household or been in business, right? The hard work is figuring out how to lower my expenses and deliver the same, if not better, service to our clients. And that's really how the government has to think. Instead, as you just said, what happens is they say, well, if you want to eliminate this tax, $400 million, where are you going to get the revenue? As compared to deliver more efficiently, right, and think about how you can lower the cost of operating, which is really what happens in businesses when they're competing for customers' dollars. And, the government, unfortunately, doesn't feel that kind of pressure unless voters really show up and ask the difficult questions and not let the candidates and the representatives off the hook and not let them tell you when they're going to lower their taxes, because that's what's got to happen.
That is what has to happen. And the thing is, the government never considers cutting. And I swear to you, like, everybody needs to cut something somewhere in your budget. Sometimes you're just floating along, paying bills, spending money, and you're like, let me just check in and see where I'm spending my money.
Right.
And you find out that you spent, $350 on coffee. Maybe I need to adjust that. Maybe I need to.
Or there's some recurring thing that's showing up on your credit card and you forgot all about it. You're not even using it. And
absolutely.
You know that goes on in government. There's just this running, expense streams that who's getting value from it. That's really what they have to look at. What is the value being created by this expense stream? And it's hard work. It
is. Subscriptions are another example of that.
Right.
You go through your subscriptions. Just take a look. I had a Dropbox subscription that was $15 a month. And I was like, I use Dropbox like twice a year. What am I doing?
Exactly.
Why?
I mean, that's a really practical way to think about. That's what the government needs to do, and really pushing, our representatives to go do that and convince the public that they've really done that inspection. They have to show up and show you, here's what we did and here's what's in there, and make it simple.
Make it simple. Unless you think, $15 a month, that's not that much money. What's the big deal? What if you took that money and invested it? Look at our pension system that's always depleted and always in trouble. What if you made those cuts and then invested that money properly where it's accumulated, it's getting, I keep forgetting the word for that. I was going to say cumulative interest. That is compounding. Thank you. That's it. Thank you, brain. Compounding interest. Where it's compounding interest, then that $15 is actually more than $15. It represents more money. And that's why that is so important.
Well, we don't need to go off into the pension, but just as a comment to the remark you just made, the unfunded liability is now getting worse because of the volatility in the market and the continuing refusal of this current legislature and administration to reform and really modernize the pension system. And, they've been able to, the last 2 years, and probably for one more year, to make this very large, $7 billion annual payment. But that isn't even getting them out of the hole. The whole system needs to be reformed because, to your point, they're just paying this bill and they're not thinking about how could I make this a more effective use of retirement investments for all of our public workers. And until they face up, that's another piece of hard work that's just got to get done, and they're avoiding it. And you're seeing, you've also seen, I'm sure, all the controversy over the health care premiums.
Oh,
for
indeed.
The public workforce.
Indeed. We're talking to Regina Egea. She's from the Garden State Initiative. We're talking about why New Jersey and the 5 other states that are with them should bury the death tax. Very informative. We're going to a break. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. We're on with Regina Egea, who is the president of Garden State Initiative, and we're talking about why New Jersey and other states like them should bury the death tax, which is an inheritance tax, as Regina very eloquently explained in the last segment. And there are other side effects or bad effects, we should say, about the death tax that has a bad effect on the economy, just from an economic principle perspective. For example, it discourages the attitude of saving and investing. So Americans in particular have this, YOLO, you only live once attitude with their money rather than investing it they spend.
Yeah, and I was thinking, Melanie, maybe we should take a minute just and distinguish the inheritance tax, which we're talking about, versus an estate tax.
Yes.
So just for the listeners' benefit, so an estate tax, which New Jersey eliminated during the last administration, is a tax that's levied on your estate when you die, and there are certain assets that the state then levies a tax on the estate itself, so it comes out of the value of the estate. Now, this inheritance tax that we're talking about, it's the heir. It's the person who's inheriting the money or the asset that is liable for this tax. And, a great example of what you just described is when you're talking about, like, for example, a farm and an individual or home, frankly, that's then bequeathed to an individual who's vulnerable, who's a niece, a nephew, a sister-in-law, a brother-in-law. And what happens is they have this hard asset that, let's say it's worth $500,000. They have to then produce cash to pay the tax. And what drives some people to do, as you were just alluding to, is they have to sell the asset because they don't have the cash to pay the tax. So they dispose of it maybe not at the right time, at the right price, because they cannot afford the tax that now they owe on that asset. And that's one of the real inefficiencies that this drives.
Exactly. And it's those family-owned businesses that tend to get hit the hardest out of every other kind of category or segment of the economy.
Oh, definitely, because, there's a market valuation that tends to be, higher than, probably someone is saving in cash or, would have on the side. Yeah, I mean, the business itself, a business that's, worth, as I said, the $500,000, they'd owe an 11% tax on that if they wanted to, take possession of it. And by the way, you don't have to live in New Jersey to be vulnerable to this tax. It's where the asset is. So anybody who's got an asset in Jersey, the person you're bequeathing it to, that if they live out of state, it doesn't matter. They still owe the tax in New Jersey.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Come on.
I kid you not.
Wow. I'm glad you brought that up because I just kind of assumed that it was only if you lived here, but it's attached to the asset.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's sneaky.
Yeah.
Now, I like them even less now. If that was at all possible. Oh my gosh, that is terrible.
Yeah, tax policy, as you say, it just can drive very, poor behavior. It's not the right thing to have happen, and it's all policy based. So that's why we're a real advocate for eliminating this, and I think letting individuals who own these assets decide how they want to dispose of them after their death.
Exactly. Now, I don't know if lawmakers consider this side effect that I'm about to say. So we talked about, businesses being less likely to save and invest, and they're more likely to spend. But also, what happens when a business decides that they're not going to reinvest? When a business decides that they're not going to expand? What happens to the job market? What happens to job creation?
Of course it goes down, and it's going on in lots of parts of our state, exactly that. You can see, we've had example after example of headquartered organizations in our state that have elected to build their plants and invest capital outside of our state and take the jobs with them.
Exactly. And that's, you would think, or maybe not, because some of these people clearly have never had an economics class, that they would think about, they're always talking about creating jobs. Well, Governor Murphy, whoever, the legislature, the House, like, you guys, what are you doing? This is a clear way to create more jobs. You could do that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, when we look at the data that, you can find on our website at Garden State Initiative, while we have recovered the jobs lost at pre-pandemic, we were one of the last states to achieve that. We have certain economic indicators. They've been improving, but we're always lagging both our region, the country in general, but our region specifically. Frequently, New York lags behind us because New York has got just a whole set of other problems. But in our region, against Massachusetts, Delaware, Pennsylvania, we generally lag both in our growth of our economy, or GDP, job recovery, our personal income growth rates. We tend to lag the entire area, and it's because of the unattractiveness, frankly, of the cost of living in our state.
You would think that they get these reports, that they get briefed on these things.
Of course they do.
And they would say, wow, I'm really doing a bad job. Maybe we should not do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
is that, am I crazy? Is that?
Yeah. You'd think they want to look at a report card, right? I mean, it's always a question of, what report card are they looking at if this is what, the data is saying. But, this is why I said, in the last segment that, voters have to, be asking these tough questions and really hold them accountable for improving what, is not being delivered by our government representatives.
For sure. Now, the other thing that happens, in addition to not hiring as many workers that businesses do have won't get as high a raises, won't be as productive. Why? Because the death tax is lowering saving and investing from a business standpoint. So the businesses can't invest that in their workers.
Yeah, there's been several, as you're describing, several unique taxes and burdens that have been put on business. In addition to this, in terms of causing them not to reinvest, I'm sure the unemployment tax, right, to reestablish the funding needed in the unemployment fund, that the decision was made not to use the available federal funds to replenish the unemployment trust fund, which finances all of the unemployment payments, but rather raise taxes on businesses. It's another way that, as you're saying, they don't have that money to reinvest in their business and grow the jobs. It's being put into a fund that could have been restored with federal funds. Instead, we're taxing businesses more now.
Indeed. And how are you going to encourage entrepreneurship if you're constantly hitting businesses with these kinds of taxes? If you are a person who's thinking, should I become an entrepreneur or should I just go work somewhere? The risks of becoming an entrepreneur are already pretty high. And then when you take into account this kind of things, the death tax, along with the other taxes that come along with owning a business, why would entrepreneurship flourish in that environment?
Well, right. In fact, to your point, it's not just the tax, but the regulation and the burdens that are put on anybody who wants to start a business. We had a business owner at one of our forums talk about he looked at opening a new entity in New Jersey, North Carolina, and Virginia. And the number of pages of data that the states required, I believe in Virginia it was like 7 pages, and in North Carolina it was 14 pages. And, you can imagine where I'm heading, right? New Jersey?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear.
58 pages of data they were insisting on in order to set up the entity in our state.
I can't with them. I can't.
I mean, those examples are just so blatant.
Well, let me tell you, I used to write op-ed, not op-eds actually, just regular articles for a blog called The Horn News. And one assignment that they gave me was to write an article on, this was federal regulations, on regulations. And what people don't realize is that when a law is passed, that's not really the law or where the devil is found. It's in the details. It's in the regulations. So my job was to find out how many regulations we have and can we get rid of any? Can we become more efficient? Here's the thing. I mentioned earlier that I study. I like to read studies. I like doing research. I like finding stuff out. I could not find the answer to this question. When finally I ran into a study that said the feds don't know.
That doesn't surprise me.
They don't know. There's up to 8,000 new regulations created a year.
Oh, I'm surprised it's that low, honestly.
Yeah, and that's just for the feds. But they don't know how many regulations they have. Now, you would think with the advent of computers, right?
Right.
That you would be able to figure that out. You'd be able to somehow keep track of that. And somebody could invent a program that says, hey, these regulations conflict. Let's not do that, instead of making people go to court.
Right, right.
But that's not what we do.
Right. Well, I mean, this is, I think at the federal level, the last administration's goal was to, they say, clean up the swamp, so to speak. Go back to zero, right? And which do we really need? If you could, it's like in budgeting, right? Zero-based budgeting.
Yes.
If you can go back and start from the beginning, right, and say, what do I actually need to build up, not what I need to tear down. It's a much more positive attitude of how you build regulation or build a budget.
Right, but it just seems ridiculous to me that we have that many regulations and we still don't conflict some out when they're passing. Like, what are we doing?
Well, whenever, when we sunset things, we don't even comply with the sunset, right? The business surcharge is supposed to sunset 2 years ago, and it never sunset.
Everybody knows who's got a modicum of sense and knows anything about the way government works, knows that when a law is built with a sunset, that sun ain't setting. No time soon. It is not happening. Excuse my improper grammar. But I'm just saying, does the sun ever set? Have you ever seen a law where the sun actually set? Especially when it came to spending?
Well, the only example I can actually think of is when there was a cap, right? And the cap expired, and so you could spend more. That's
right, those. Yeah, those will be fine. The sun will set on that if there's a cap. But no, not if they've said we're going to spend on that and we're only going to do it this year and see how it works out. Right.
Exactly.
Not with any kind of new tax. Not going to happen. No way, no how. It just isn't that way. And we mentioned earlier about how there's always a tax on wages. Now let me ask you this: is there anyone who benefits from the death tax? Because I'm thinking some lobbyists somewhere are keeping this alive somewhere.
No, it goes into the general fund. So it's more a desire to keep the revenue lines high. No, there's always some minimal cost to, legally transfer property ownership. So there should be some modest fee for the government work that has to occur to change from one name to the other. But other than that, I can't think of any that I know of. I think it's just more the desire to have revenue, frankly, that it's so, dispersed and people don't realize it till it's too late. So there's no real advocate right now, right, to eliminate this. Like there are, advocacy groups for, adding environmental taxes or, different subjects, but there's no real entity to advocate. So we took it up as our charge.
Good. Excellent. Well, I know it does give large businesses an advantage over small businesses. And while, we have many, politicians that say that they're for the little guy and that they're for small businesses, their policies say different.
I agree. It becomes quite plain when you really look inside the impact of different tax policies that the small businesses are getting hurt tremendously. And I remember the number being over half of the people who are employed in New Jersey are employed in small to medium businesses.
Sure, many people are. And then you have large companies, and I'm just thinking, if the owner or the president or the board of a large company makes certain decisions, now I'm thinking really dark and dirty in politics because I'm in election mode. But I'm just saying, it's just true. Makes a donation to certain politicians, and then they might not want to pass that law that's going to negatively affect those big companies.
Well, it's certainly one of the biggest concerns in local and federal and state level elections. Sure, the influence of different donors on the policies. But look, there are a lot of people, frankly, in companies that influence policies here. They don't even live in our state. that really galls me.
Don't get me started on that. You're so right, and many people don't realize that.
A lot of executives in large corporations do not live in our state, and they show up and they, lecture us about what ought to happen here. Really?
While they don't live here, while they don't keep their businesses here because of the exact things that we're talking about.
Exactly, Melanie, exactly. So that's why I think, there's a real undercurrent, I think. At least the people I'm talking to and that I hear from in the Garden State Initiative, that there's a real undercurrent of understanding, like, we have to have a much more assertive electoral group and really demand, because right now I honestly believe that we're being run over, not just on this, inheritance tax, but, energy. I'd love to come back on and talk about energy.
We will. Because you have the Garden State Initiative has some fabulous information on energy, and especially, I don't know if you heard my open when we talked about the strategic reserves being tapped again for, in my opinion, political reasons. You don't have to say that. You're independent. But I'll say it, for political reasons, that they're tapping into the oil reserves and what effect that has. But the energy policy is just really wild. Matter of fact, maybe next month we'll have you come back. And talk about that, because that's hot right now.
And it's going on our state, right under everybody's. It began during COVID when all these meetings happened at the Board of Public Utilities. All these decisions and commitments on contracts are being made. They're going to make energy unaffordable in our state, and I'm very worried about that.
I am too. Regina, Egea, everyone from the Garden State Initiative, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell people where they can find the Garden State Initiative, where they can follow you on social media, etc.
Absolutely, yes. We are on both Facebook and on Twitter, and our website is gardenstateinitiative.org. And anybody can reach out to me through our website.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Regina. You did a great job. I really enjoyed having you.
Me too. Thanks, Melanie. Have a great rest of your show.
You too.
Okay.
The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, regional media, coastal broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. If you missed the first hour, shame on you. You missed Regina Egea from the Garden State Initiative. She talked to us about why the death tax needs to be buried in New Jersey and the other states in which it exists. We talked about the differences between an inheritance tax and a death tax. We talked about the negative effects that not only it has on small businesses, but it has on our overall economies. So policymakers need to get with the program and kill the death tax. And Regina gave us some very solid reasons why that should happen. Policy, just solid policy, independent reasons. So if you missed that, you should go back to the podcast, which will be posted on our website here at 98.7 The Coast, or anywhere that you like to listen to your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Blueberry, Spotify, all those wonderful places, iHeartRadio. Or you could follow me on social media, where I will always post a link on @MoneyTalkMel on Twitter, or Money Talk with Melanie on Facebook. If you are really feeling adventurous and want to follow my political musings, you can follow me on Twitter at NJGOPDiva, NJGOPDiva, and I live up to its name every single day. But a little more about the news. So we've been talking, I feel like I talk every week about inflation, but that's because it's a thing. We talked last hour about how chocolate candy is up by 13%. Halloween candy is going to be more expensive this year. And while one of the economic fundamentals that you look at when you are analyzing the economy is wage increases, and that's fine. But if the wage increase does not catch up with inflation, it is actually a pay cut. So why do I say that? So inflation is at around 8% right now. Wage increases are at about 5%. So let's do the math. What that means is you actually have had a 3% pay cut. because your money does not go as far even with your raise. So if you are thinking to yourself, I got a raise, I can spend more money. Well, no, not if you look at the condition of the economy. You cannot spend more money. Actually, what you can do is cut your budget by 3%, because that is what just happened because of inflation. That is what's just happened to your money. And you may be looking at your budget thinking, how come I don't have more money when I got a raise? This is why, because everything costs more money. Now, I do want to talk to you about something else. Life insurance, especially when you're young. Now, nobody wants to talk about life insurance ever because we're all going to live forever, right? None of us are ever going to meet our maker and go be with the Lord, but we are. It's just the fact of life. So, especially young people don't think that they need life insurance. And they rarely get the coverage that they need. So I want to talk about some myths that young people believe about obtaining life insurance and why they think they don't need it. The number one myth is you're young and healthy. I don't need life insurance. I'm young and healthy. But you may not stay that way. That's just the bottom line. That's just very true. It's sad, but true. You may not stay that way and need the care, the money that life insurance provides for your family, for your expenses. Also, there's this misconception that life insurance is only for death benefits. But depending on the kind of life insurance policy you get, there's also a cash value that's associated with some forms of insurance. Now, while I will tell you as a licensed insurance producer myself that people don't encourage you, the laws don't encourage you to use life insurance policy as investment tools, there are people who do. And there is cash value associated with it. You can borrow that money, and all that would happen is that your death benefit would be less unless you paid it back, and you would be required to pay it back. But that's something that people don't know about, don't think about, but it's something to have. I've had life insurance since I was like 25 years old, and it has come in handy. Stay-at-home parents don't think that they need life insurance because they're thinking that they're not bringing in income. So I don't need life insurance. You might have a husband that's a breadwinner or a wife that's a breadwinner. Whoever stays home might think that they don't need life insurance. Actually, that is to the contrary. Whatever that person is doing at home to take care of kids, there's a number on it. That's the ugly side of life. You are worth something financially. We're not talking about what you're worth as a human. We're not talking about what you're worth to God. We're talking about what you're worth financially. So if your husband or wife stays home, takes care of the kids, there's a number on that. How much does it cost for good quality child care for your kid while you're at working? If God forbid something happens to those kids' caretaker, who's going to cook for them? Who's going to clean your house? Who's going to shop? There's a number on all of that. And life insurance comes in handy if something like that, tragedy strikes and something like that happens. Single people think they don't need life insurance. Not true. It can help your family cover your final expenses and take care of any outstanding debts. So just because you're single doesn't mean that you don't need life insurance. This one is the biggest one, and this is not just young people. This is, I feel like, everybody, especially people who work for the government. This one, my employer's life insurance policy is enough. That's a big one. I get that a lot. And that is just not true. They're issued by employers. And generally, it's not bad, but it might not always be enough to protect you if you die. You need to look into that. Like, a lot of people don't even look into how much it is and do an assessment of whether or not that's enough to cover your expenses. So, using the example that I used with the previous myth, if you are a breadwinner and you make, $100,000 a year, and your life insurance is only up to $50,000, well, how does that pay for paying off your house? How does that pay for your kids' college education? How does that pay for, the deficit that's going to be in your income for the next 6 months to a year until your partner, is able to get a job and make up that income? All of that stuff needs to be accounted for. So that's be very careful with your employer's life insurance. And when you're in the HR office, peel back the onion. Call your life insurance provider and find out exactly what the details are. It's a good idea to do that assessment at least once a year. A final myth is that it's too expensive. A lot of people, especially when they get married, they try to limit their expenses, which is not a bad thing. You want to limit your experience. And one of the things you think is, I don't need to get life insurance. The truth of the matter is that when you are younger, life insurance is much less expensive. And even if you do a term life policy, you can, once you're at the end of that term and you're middle age or whatever, you don't have to worry about getting a medical exam because you're probably not going to be as healthy. And your life insurance is going to be more expensive. So the earlier you get it, actually, the better off you are. So it's just something to think about, young people. If you want to be financially healthy, if you want to be an adult and get to adulting, this is an important part of it. Think about getting yourself some life insurance, just something to think about. You can find an article with details about this on Business Insider under personal finance, by the way. And if you follow me on social media, you can find much more information very similar to that I find to be very helpful. Now, we on the other side of the break, we'll have, not that I have favorite guests, but I kind of do. She's one of my favorites. Eva Rosenberg, a.k.a. the TaxMama, is coming on in just a few minutes. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. By the way, shout out to Robert Houston, who is MrCreditRepair.biz. Make sure you check out his website. He offers so many courses and so many just great things about credit repair and just finance in general. You definitely want to check out MrCreditRepair.biz. Now, I am super excited. I think I mentioned before the break that I don't have favorite guests, but I really do. One of the reasons I love doing this show so much is because I get to talk to such smart people who are professionals and experts in their field, just like Regina Egea, who's an expert in policy. Eva Rosenberg, otherwise known as TaxMama, check her out at TaxMama.com, is one of those people. She is the publisher of TaxMama.com, where your tax questions are answered for free. She's also the author of over 400 articles, 2,000 tax quips, podcasts, and several award-winning best-selling books, including, I don't know if it's updated yet, we'll ask her when she comes on, the 2020 edition of Small Business Taxes Made Easy. In addition to all of that, she teaches a tax pro course at irsexams.school. So without further adu, Eva Rosenberg. Are you okay? You okay?
Do we still have time to talk?
I only read your tiny bio.
Oh my God! Thank you very, very much. I mean that sounds amazing. But all it is plodding along every day, helping people, right?
You are, but you're helping people with one of the most complex and scary and anxiety-inducing things that we deal with as adults, which is our taxes.
And it's an area I never wanted to get into because it is overwhelming. It changes every time I blink. And you have no idea how much we have to do to keep up. But, listening to Regina, she has a lot to do to keep up. She's doing amazing stuff.
She certainly is. We found each other on LinkedIn, and we hit it off immediately, and we're like, yeah, we're going to do work together, for sure.
Yeah, I think listening to what she had to say, you are going to be working with her again because she's handling a lot of important issues. I handle some, You handle
a lot of important issues, too, and we're going to dig into that. Now, we've talked about many different things. Wait, before I mentioned your book, do you have a new book coming out? Do you have a more recent one than 2020? I used the same bio that I had for you last time you were on the show, which was this year.
Well, the book is not updated yet because I keep waiting for Congress to finish passing their laws. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be starting to work on some ebooks on unique, specific topics rather than the whole book.
Ah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
That's going to be easier to put out for people to be able to pick up and use, and they'll be current all the time. Ebooks are easier to keep updated.
For sure. Well, look out for that, ladies and gentlemen, because the information is just accurate and good, and she answers free tax questions like who does that. Just a wonderful resource at TaxMama.com. So you definitely want to do that.
Yeah, it really is a free resource. I set it up so that people who don't know where else to turn, don't have a tax pro, can come and get reliable information with references to the sources. So it's not just me blowing steam. And if I'm wrong, there are other people on Team TaxMama who correct me. They have no qualms.
Who will say, "Excuse me, TaxMama, but this is not okay."
Exactly.
Well, I brought you on today to specifically talk about theft, casualty, and romance scams. I did not realize this was such a big thing, but we recently corresponded about this very subject, and I was like, you have to come on the show and talk about this.
God, things go on all the time without us really being aware of them until it hits you in the face. And one of my clients, who is smart, intelligent, college-educated, a widow, became very vulnerable and got hit with a romance scam last year and early this year to the tune of $450,000.
I can't imagine that. Like, I just can't. That's just. You said she's smart, she's college educated, but she was vulnerable.
And she's aware of all that information that's out there about scams, just like the rest of us. How vulnerable must she have been? How lonely must she have been to succumb to this guy from a dating site who persuaded her that he was in love with her, and he invested over 6 months to get her confidence. These scamsters really, really know how to play their victims, and they're probably doing multiple people at one time. So they're collecting millions from just one person running that particular scam out of an office.
That's insane. And one of the articles that you sent when we were corresponding was this report from the FBI that says there's $1 billion in losses reported by victims of romance scams.
Yeah, just romance scam. And the FBI has 14 other scams where people are losing billions of dollars.
And I think it's important to note that it was only 24,000 victims that totaled $1 billion.
Right. And so how much did they get from these people? And, it's not just that they got money from these people. Like my friend, a lot of people pull money out of retirement accounts, so it's taxable money. They pull money out of their brokerage accounts, so once again, taxable money. And so not only do they lose this money, they have to pay tax on all this money.
And that is just wild. That someone would. I mean, God knows everybody makes mistakes, tremendous mistakes. I have a long line of my own, but
not so much.
But I mean,
but we work our way through them, right?
Right, exactly.
How do you work through this? Because we can't get a deduction for the theft loss, and this, my friends, is why you have invited me here. Is because the tax code right now has taken away the right for people who have been victims of theft or casualty loss, other than in a presidentially declared disaster area or Ponzi schemes, and this doesn't meet the definition. They can't take a deduction for this at all. So here she's got $450,000 worth of losses, and I can't take a deduction and reduce her taxes to at least get her to kind of break even.
Right. Now, what do you think, just look, so much about tax policy and tax law, what could possibly have been, motive is the wrong word, but like what financial principle might lawmakers been thinking about when they got rid of this deduction? Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
When I read the law, and I just finished Small Business Taxes Made Easy when they passed the law, and I had to rewrite it. So I actually had to read the law, and I saw this particular provision, in December of 2018, and I went into shock. I said, this is going to be a problem for real people. Let's say somebody's house burns down and it's not a presidentially declared disaster area. Even with insurance, they're out of pocket a lot. So what do I think Congress's concept was on this, other than I have no idea? The only thing I can think of is maybe they're trying to balance some other number, and there is a certain amount of fraud in casualty and theft losses. There's no question. But there is reality. There are real people with real documented losses, and I really did not want to see those people left out of the protection of the law.
For sure, and we're up against a break, but I just wanted to mention too that this $1 billion that the feds are talking about doesn't include, the chick or the dude who makes $50,000 a year and got scammed out of $10,000 out of their retirement fund.
And you know what's worse? The money is going out of the country. The money did not stay here. These people are not in the U.S.
That is terrible. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. My guest this hour is Eva Rosenberg, a.k.a. the Tax Mama. Check her out at TaxMama.com. We will be back on the other side of the break.
Brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. This hour we're speaking with Eva Rosenberg, a.k.a. the Tax Mama. And before the break, Eva, you were talking about how there's no tax relief for people who suffer losses from scams.
There isn't, and it disappeared. We used to have that before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So from 2018 to 2025, nobody with any kind of casualty or theft is able to claim a deduction. Now, I know that there is a lot of information out there warning people about different scams, and AARP has a foundation, and I checked with them. I spent an hour and a half trying to reach somebody there, and about new issues to talk to them. And all they do for people who have problems is give them a bunch of boilerplate on kind of stuff they can do that will not help them at all. It might reassure them and keep them busy for hours. Most state boards of consumer affairs have information to watch out for this, the FBI, all of this. File a report, which my friend did, and nobody calls you back. No point in calling the police because these scammers are not in the country. They can't reach these people. So, it's not even like they're even going to get their money back. And then I found something that was very interesting, that was kind of promising. So two legislators, Collins and Klobuchar, Republican and Democrat, put together this joint legislation, and it was about senior fraud. And I was so excited when I saw that because they passed that bipartisan legislation earlier this year, around March or April, and then I read it. It's all about throwing money at educating seniors to avoid these problems.
Well,
excuse me if I'm snorting.
Yeah, that's not super helpful.
No, most of these people, and you've read some of these articles that we've been looking at, 70% of these people are educated. They know what's going on. They don't need more information. And a lot of them won't tell their families what's going on.
That's exactly right, because they're embarrassed.
It's not even just that they're embarrassed. These guys convince them, or ladies on the other hand, they convince them not to tell the family because, until we're ready to meet and everything, we love each other, we're going to get married.
Oh, wow.
There's some serious stuff, and if you talk to them, they're going to discourage you from being involved with me. We don't want that to happen, do we?
That is awful.
Yeah, and the banks, my first reaction when she told me this, by the way, was, let's talk to the bank. The bank should be responsible for not letting you, send this money out. And she said the bank tried to talk to her.
What do you mean?
My heart broke. The bank tried to get her not to release these funds, but she was so sure that, they were wrong, that it's not really a scam, that he really loves her.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, they're good. These guys are good. My husband, after his, you're helping me. You're helping me with your team at your boss's office, at Andrew's office. And after I talked to Blake, my husband hands me this article from The Economist, and it talks about these people in the Orient who are offered these amazing jobs, good money, room and board, and everything else. And so they go to this place, I think in Cambodia or whatever, and it turns out they are locked into a compound with people with guns and barbed wire, and they are forced to call people and scam them. They're given 10 different cell phones, so they have different numbers, they can have different identities, they're given scripts, and they cannot leave.
Oh, my word!
This is where some of this stuff is coming from. It's scarier than heck, not just for our victims, but for those people forced to do this.
That is crazy. You would think, I thought that we had like an international police that works on these kinds of things.
Well, we've got Interpol, and they're very good in movies and stuff. I don't know what they do in real life. The IRS actually has their criminal investigation division does stuff, and they do investigate things. And a couple of years ago, they broke one of these amazing child porno rings, arrested about 300 people, collected a lot of money that was out there on the web. So they do some of this stuff. And, I hadn't thought of talking to the Criminal Investigation Division, but I will be seeing all those people next week at the IRS Tax Controversy Institute, the UCLA one next week, and a lot of the key managers from the IRS will be there. And you know how annoying I can be.
When you want to get something done to tax reform, you sure are. You get on it.
Yeah, look, what do you have to lose? They're not going to talk to you, so they didn't talk to you if you didn't go there.
Exactly right. I love it, though. You're doing good for the people, though. I mean, this is something that's not being looked at, that needs to be highlighted and needs a huge light shined on it. One of the articles that you sent over to me had me floored, my mouth open. I actually just posted it on my Facebook page underneath the ad for the show, was the one from FBI.gov that described the different scams. I'm thinking a romance scam is your typical, you're romancing someone and they just get money from you. But that lists 15 pretty sophisticated kinds of scams.
Yes, and there are so many, if anytime you find a way to reach people with money, somebody's going to find a way to scam them. I remember years ago, we were waiting for some people when my father-in-law died. We were waiting for his ministers and stuff, and they were late. And the reason they were late is they were sitting with this elderly woman who had been visited by these guys who promised to help her with her Medicare filings, and they had just taken her to the bank and gotten all of her savings.
Oh, my word.
And so these ministers were helping her, recoup some of this and sort this out and get the police involved and so forth. But back then, there were people literally going door to door to all of these seniors and bringing them this information as though they were really from Medicare.
And that's not how that works at all. But it
breaks my heart, doesn't it? I mean, I can hear that the despair in your voice too.
Well, because I just wonder, like, what kind of people are these? Like, what? Like, they have no soul, no scruples, no morals. Like, who wakes up, rolls out of bed, and is like, let me scam some seniors today? Like, I just don't.
Really? Let me put that on my to-do list today.
Right. Let's see. Got to pick up groceries, maybe get my car service. And I need to scam at least 5 seniors to pay for that. Like, what? It's amazing to me.
And so most of that is not here. And a lot of this, for instance, in her case, she joined a dating site. And I do have to warn anybody who's listening, please do not put in your profile that you are a widow or widower. Do not let people know that you are alone that way. You know, it's one thing to be single, but when they see that you're a widow or widower, instant victim.
Right, because you're in a vulnerable state. You probably, you lost your husband or wife, soulmate, whatever, and sure, you are not thinking clearly.
Right, unless you're one of those black widows who keeps murdering subsequent spouses. If you watch enough TV, you see that.
This is true. Maybe
you'll find somebody and do it to them.
I was just thinking that. See, great minds think alike. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was about to say.
God.
I'm like, hopefully one of these black widows will get one of these scammers.
Wouldn't you love it? But they never get to meet them. They keep promising to meet them. They're going to meet them in Switzerland, or they're going to meet them in Europe or something, and then right at the last minute, I couldn't make it. And they might even have already, the victim might already have gone there, and these people aren't there. They never meet these people. They just have promises.
That's just, and who doesn't want to be in love? It's a good feeling, right? Like when it happens, well, good and maybe not, but.
Well, you know what? I mean, I know so many wonderful, wonderful people, smart people, who are lonely. Smart professional people, busy working and stuff. Especially as we grow older, our besties kind of fade away. They get their own lives, and they're lonely. They're just flat out lonely. And, somebody preys on that feeling. I just pray that I'm never going to feel that vulnerable or that lonely in my lifetime, that I'm going to submit to somebody who claims to love me.
Well, for sure, and I think the thing is that they probably are not feeling stressed or anxious about that. They're probably feeling quite good, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why they get sucked in.
Oh, yeah. As I say, 6-8 months of invested time, plying them with promises, compliments and everything. They might even do it visually, through Zoom or something like that. And the name, of course, is phony. They have to keep track of, which person they're scamming and everything.
Oh, right, like who they are to that particular person.
Right, exactly.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
they might even see them.
On video.
On video, yeah.
But that person is not who they say they are at all.
And they're not. They're never going to see them in person. That person may be in Cambodia. They may be in Africa. They may be in Russia.
And I wonder when you get these random messages through Messenger or on social media, your DMs, your direct message, and it must work, I would think, or people wouldn't do it.
Well, it's a matter of, it's a numbers game. So you send out 1,000 of these and one person responds. That one person is going to give you a couple $100,000. And you're sending it out electronically these days, so it costs practically nothing.
That's true. No, low overhead.
These days it's low overhead. And you know where else I'm actually personally seeing this? You ever hear of Words with Friends?
Yes, absolutely.
And why aren't we friends?
Yeah, how about, we're not friends on Words with Friends. We have to fix that.
We have to fix that. So I keep getting these invitations from men to play with them. And then they start the conversation, hi, you look beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And this started a few years ago, and I started seeing a pattern. If you don't answer them, they stop playing, and you look at their scores. You look at these people and their history, and if their average score is something like 50 or something like that, you know that that's what they are. They're predators. And Words with Friends changed some of their policies so we can actually block these people now. But I'm seeing a lot of that. I see that about twice a week.
That often?
So, yeah. So, so you start out with a conversation. You start out with something in common. and then you let it escalate.
Well, fortunately, one of the articles that you sent, the FBI.gov, did give some tips, and you would think that it would be common sense, but not if you're vulnerable, because you're not thinking clearly. I think all of us can think of a time or two, or in my case 10, where I was emotional and made a decision that I came to regret.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough through normal dating.
Right. Okay? Really? Seriously?
Yes. So, and when they're lying to you, and then they turn out to be married or something, I mean, it's bad enough on normal stuff.
Right. And then this person really just woke up out of bed and said, I'm going to scam some folks today.
Or I have to. I'm being forced to scam 10 folks today.
I think the most important tip that they give is never send money, crypto, or gift cards to anyone you have only communicated with online or by phone.
Absolutely.
Yep, and it says regardless of how in love you are or how in love they say they are with you.
And every time, they start out with something small, like send me a gift card. I need to take care of this little thing for $50 or even $15. It's a hook. Once they have you hooked, you're on that line. That first $15 thing says, okay, now we know what you are, but how much more can we get from you?
That's insane. That's just crazy. And so what you, being the rock star that you are trying to do is see, hey, can we fix this? Can this be fixed?
Yeah, I know that I can't fix the people becoming victims, okay? And I know that the Collins-Klobuchar bill is going to be absolutely useless, putting more money into information. So what I want to do is give these people back a tax break, help them recoup the taxes on the money that they have to, the tax money they have to pay for all of the investment money that they've taken out. She wiped out her retirement plan. She got a reverse mortgage on her house and took out 50% of that.
Oh dear.
I mean, and this is a smart person. And how many, what about older people? I mean, seriously older people. She's only like 60-ish. But, what about seriously older people who really don't have anyone around them, to take care of them at all?
So if she was 60, she wasn't eligible to take out her retirement money yet.
Oh yeah, she was able to take out retirement money, but it's taxable.
Well, it's 10%, and isn't it a 10% penalty?
Yeah, she doesn't have the penalty, but she has to pay tax on the whole thing.
Oh, goodness gracious.
So even with withholding, thank God there was withholding at least, even with withholding, she still owes a bunch of money to the IRS and her state. So one of the things I'm trying to accomplish, with your help, is to get something started. If I can get something into the pipeline that will ultimately lead to a change in legislation, I can do something very, very special for her and other people in the same boat, and then we can do a whole thing about how this works, and write about it, is something called a protective claim. This is where, you file a normal tax return, and then you file an amended return claiming these losses, so that you're ultimately going to get a refund. They're not going to get it if we file a protective claim, but what this does is it lets them get that money even 10 or 15 years from now if the legislation ever changes.
Really?
Yeah, otherwise we can only file the amendment within 3 years of when the return was due, but if this thing got started and we filed this protective claim, if the legislation changes, then the IRS will release that money however long it takes.
And see, this is why you'd never work for the IRS, because you're just so much smarter.
I am not, and if I were, there are two different positions I would consider, and that is working in the Taxpayer Advocate's Office, because they help people, they solve problems, they recommend legislation, and they're everybody's lifesaver. And the other is the IRS Stakeholder Liaison Office. They're kind of the communication office, but they are so helpful reaching people when you can't find anybody to take a call or solve a problem. They are my angels. They do so much to help.
Really? The feds?
The feds. I know people at the IRS and the Taxpayer Advocate Service who bend over backwards, will work all night to help people. Literally, we have that thing with the passport revocation, and the Taxpayer Advocate's policy was if people want to come in out of the cold, and these are people who owe more than $55,000 and have ignored the IRS forever.
Oh dear.
So I don't have any sympathy for them. But now they want their passport. Her policy is to have her staff literally work around the clock to help them get reinstated and get them on a payment plan and get them their passport.
So is that what happens if you owe $55,000 or more and you're just like, I'm not paying them? They'll take your passport?
No. You have to ignore them a lot.
Oh, God. Well, I'm afraid of the feds. Any law enforcement. That's why I'm on the straight and narrow most of the time.
Well, it helps to be on the straight and narrow. You don't have to look over your back. You don't have to remember which lie you used.
Right. I would think that they would come get you. I'm surprised at $55,000 they don't put you in jail.
I don't really want to put a lot of people in jail. It costs so much to support them.
This is true. And then you're never going to get the money.
Right, yeah. I'd rather get them to give the money. And I think that's one of the reasons the Taxpayer Advocate does this, is because if they want their passport and they agree to do these things voluntarily, they'll actually get money.
That is true. That's a smart policy to have, because if you lock them up, you're never going to get that money, and you're going to be in a hole, because like you just mentioned, you're paying for that person.
Right, and they have to divulge where all of their assets are, and so if they stop paying, the IRS can attach them now that they know exactly where they are. Not entirely a stupid policy when you think about it.
No, that's a pretty smart policy. That's not a bad policy. Now, you mentioned that a presidentially declared disaster. As far as scams are concerned, are you saying that this qualifies as like an economic or financial disaster?
I think so. Okay, it's not intuitive, and it's not necessarily the way presidentially declared disaster areas were meant to be interpreted. Right?
This is true.
Most of those are geographic things, but look at the one that we do have declared that isn't geographic, right? We have President Trump declared the coronavirus epidemic a presidentially declared disaster area. So we actually have a president who used this power to do a non-geographic declaration. This is what I would love to have President Biden do. I don't know anybody who can take this to him or to Kamala and bring this to their attention and say, look, all you have to do is sign a declaration and solve the problem.
Well,
you
I
don't
think
even need Congress.
Yeah, well, and listen, he does that. I mean, presidents do that now. That's their thing. It's what they do. Executive order. Forget the Congress.
Yes, I want an executive order, and I don't know anyone who could take it to them. So if anyone's listening and they know somebody who can reach the president or Kamala and get it to them as a concept, please get in touch with me. I really would love to see that. It would be such a shortcut, and it would help the 24,000 people who've lost $3.6 billion?
I mean, it would be a good get. It'd be a good look. You could do a press conference, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it would make them look. Can you imagine how good it would make them look right now? Everybody is fighting in the political arena now, and everybody looks bad. The public is so unhappy with pretty much everybody. So this would make the people who deal with this look like such heroes.
I agree, and I think you could get bipartisan support on that. I think everybody would jump on that. You'd have people from both parties behind President Biden's desk while he's signing that into law.
Yeah, including Van Drew, right?
Well, of course.
Of course, because he's working on this. I mean, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you're doing this. My own legislator here Brad Sherman here in the Valley, in San Fernando Valley, who has been in one office or another for the last 30 years, won't even respond to my emails.
Oh, well, that's terrible.
I haven't called him. I know I haven't actually called, but I have emailed him about 3 times. Not a single aide has responded. And this is a guy I've met many times.
Really?
Yes.
See, that's...
He's a CPA.
That's, say what you want about the good Congressman Van Drew. He is very responsive to people's needs. He always has been.
Yeah, and so this really galls me. The other person I really wanted to reach, besides Amy Klobuchar, who has just, been an interesting woman.
She is interesting.
Yeah. Adam Schiff has been very effective. Whether you agree with what he's doing or not, everything he does, he is so organized and very effective. And he's here in California. And you can't reach him through his website unless you are in his zip code.
What?
Yeah, come on, guys. There are national issues. Why does your communication have to be limited to the people in your own specific district?
Yeah, that's not good policy. It just isn't. That's just bad policy.
Yeah, and I don't know what you learned in school when you were studying civics or what you taught, but what I learned was when somebody gets elected to office, it doesn't matter what their party is. They represent everybody.
That's correct. That is 150% correct.
So why isn't that happening?
It should be happening. It should be happening. I mean,
right?
People that I know that work in these legislative offices do not ask constituents what party they're in. Mm-hmm. They're there to help their constituents because they represent everyone, like you said.
Yeah, and that's what I expect. I'm an idealist and I'm very naive, which is why I can make these requests.
Listen, it could happen. I really believe it could happen. I'm wondering if there's anybody listening and if there's anybody who has ideas of what else can be done to move the ball forward on this.
Yeah. Anybody who's listening or anybody who's had this happen, if you go to TaxMama.com and click on the top where it says Ask a Question, just pop in notes and stuff. I read those things first thing in the morning. If there's a way I can use it and respond and help you, I will. This is what I do. And, we've been doing that to help people, literally for over 20 years. I think it started in 1999.
Yes.
To make that a free service. It's not a nonprofit organization. There are too many complications and paperwork you have to fill out for nonprofit organizations, but it might as well be.
Now, is there a possibility for state legislation and state taxes to do something similar and pass a similar kind of law? Obviously, you couldn't do the presidential thing. You'd have to do it through legislation. But, could there be similar relief on the state level?
Sure. And it's going to go state by state. For instance, California never conformed to this. California lets you take the deduction.
There you go. That makes sense.
I don't know about New Jersey. I know New Mexico pretty much follows the IRS. She's in New Mexico, and in New Mexico, they don't even have a formal offer and compromise program in her case, for the balances she owes.
Oh, right.
I can get her an offer and compromise. There is no way that I cannot get her an offer and compromise for something called effective tax administration. This is where if the IRS insisted on doing this, they would look like monsters. So I can get her that. But she paid a whole bunch of money. I want that back.
Listen, and she is so fortunate to have you. You're listening to Eva Rosenberg. We're at the end of the hour. Tell people where they can find you and where they can buy your books and all that good stuff.
Oh, just come to TaxMama.com, click on Ask a Question at the top, and don't worry about the books.
Okay.
Not right now. Come on back when I've got ebooks. Sign up for my newsletter, and I'll tell you when I issue the ebooks. In the meantime, the newsletter is free. Just drop on by.
I love it. Eva Rosenberg, everyone, a.k.a. the Tax Mama. Thank you so much for coming on.
And have a less taxing day.
Indeed. We'll be back.
Brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. I'd like to thank Regina Egea from Garden State Initiative, the one and only Eva Rosenberg, a.k.a. TaxMama. I would like to thank Mark and our newbie on the boards this evening. Sam did a great job in the second hour. I want to thank Robert Houston from MrCreditRepair.biz and all of you for listening this evening. Thank you so very much. If you're listening to this as a podcast, thank you as well. Next week, there'll be another wonderful episode of Money Talk with Melanie. And remember, all of this is important because after all, it's your money.